Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Christy. How are you today?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
We have some fun things to talk about this week, and I don't know if everyone knows this, but I, my husband and I had a lot of trouble getting pregnant, like so many people do. And so when we first started trying to get pregnant, everybody else in our friend group was getting pregnant and having babies, and then we never did, and we realized there was a problem. And so sometime I'll tell you about our first child, who is a miracle, and that's a really cool story, and some people have heard it. But and then we wanted a second child, so we started trying again, and we could not have children. And I was told, well, you're going to have to undergo some fertility treatments. And so we prayed about it, and we felt like we would do that one time. We'll try one time. We also explored adoption. We'll try it one time to have some fertility treatments, and boom, we got pregnant with triplets. So I have triplets, and this is now their senior year in high school. So we're about to say goodbye to my triplets for the childhood and the teenage part of their life, but hello to the young adult part of their life. So I tell you all this to say that this is going to lead us into today's topic, which is managing our time. And something we've done for our senior year is I've decided that, we have one year left with them, and I want to make that count. And I do have a lot of regrets and things that I wish I had done differently. And it's hard not to. I admire people who don't, but it's hard for me not to. But I decided that I'm not going to live in the past this year. And I'm not going to try and spend a year just completely scrambling and making up for all of that. But I am going to do what I can. And so one thing I decided for us to do is that once a month we would pick a new place to go to dinner as a family. And it would be someplace that kind of a new experience, a new adventure that we could share together. And when we went there, we would have a conversation, and every month share a prayer request and sort of a goal for the month, and then just a desire that we wanted to express to each other that month, and that I would keep a journal of it. And so here's my journal that I started, and we've done it twice. The first time was the night before school started for their senior year. We went to a raw oyster bar, which we'd never done before, and it was weird. And it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, but the experience was kind of cool. They brought out raw oysters and lots of different sauces. And so I journaled and said where we went and what we tried. And I kind of put everybody's reactions in there. I took some pictures and put the pictures in there. And then the last time we did it, we went to a place called Loro. That's a new restaurant made by two of the most famous chefs in Austin. Joined forces together. They, instead of being competitors, they decided to be friends and open up a restaurant, and I've been wanting to try it. So we went there. So we have been journaling this, and this is what we've tried to do for our senior year. So this is one example of what we're going to talk about today, and I wanted to open up with that little story and now hand it over to you so you can let these fine people know kind of what we're doing.
Well, we are talking about redeeming time, and I love your story, Christy. In fact, when you were sharing it, I was thinking back to when your triplets were in first grade, and I think, how has it happened that they're seniors? This season of time has gone by so quickly. And I love
you interviewed us to come into school, so yes.
And I remember that day, and I think about the fact that the university model schedule has given you time with these triplets. And here you are, and they're seniors, and you have this entire journey behind you. So I want to just start out today with reading Ephesians 5:15 through 16, which says, "Be careful how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil." And I just think it's so amazing how quickly this thing called time that we're constantly trying to manage and trying to use well goes by. And then it reminds me of God and time and his eternal nature. So I want to also read to you a quote by Jen Wilkin in her book, None Like Him. And she said, "God is simultaneously the God of the past, present, and future, bending time to his perfect will, unfettered by its constraints. The past holds for him no missed opportunity. The present holds for him no anxiety. The future holds for him no uncertainty. He was and is to come. I've been trying to talk to those of you who don't know me, I have 11 grandkids at the school. When I started, I had none. And I try to bring these truths to them because I get to work with each group of them one day a week. And this week I was trying to explain eternity to my second and third graders, which I have on Thursday. And Elsie, who's in third grade, she was listening to me, and I could tell her mind was whirling, and she was trying to wrap her mind around eternity. And she said, Oma, I don't get it. She says, why didn't God make the earth sooner than he did? And I mean, how do we answer that? What's sooner to God? And I remember as a child trying to wrap my mind around eternity, and how it almost made my mind want to explode. These are hard truths, and yet they're so life-changing. Are they not? They change us. So we want to look today. Tozer said this. He said, "But we are made for eternity as certainly as we are made for time. And as responsible moral beings, we must deal with both." So that's kind of where we are. What are we going to do with that?
Right. What can we do? How do we make good use of the time? And these are the questions that I kind of was asking at the beginning of my girls' senior year. And I think it's, the first thing to do is stop and just take stock of where you are. And I'm going to go back to your quote just real quick, Ellen, your Jen Wilkin quote, because it really got me. The part where it says, the past for God holds no missed opportunity. Mm-hmm. The present holds no anxiety. The future holds no uncertainty. Nice. I want to brand these words into my heart, that for God, there is no missed opportunity in the past, no anxiety in the present, and no uncertainty in the future. And I just think, how can I have just even a taste of that when my own life is so often not characterized that way? And so that's my question, is how can I align myself more to God so that the truth of who he is then causes me to not reckon my past to have a missed opportunity? Because really, even though I in reality have missed opportunities in my past, I still have offered them my entire past as God's, and he can redeem all that. He says that, I can restore the years the locusts have eaten and other things like that. And then he can hold my present, and so I don't have to be anxious. And he can certainly hold my future, and so I don't have to be uncertain. That phrase that I often use with my children is, we may not know what the future holds, but we know who holds the future. So how can we align ourselves to the truth of who God is, and therefore make ourselves steady in that?
Well, Christi, thank you for driving that quote home to my heart as well. And that's really what we're going to be kind of looking at today, is some tips on how we can do this practically day in, day out. As parents in this model of education, life is busy. It's busy really for all of us, raising kids and being driven people who have taken on the role of also educating kids. And it gets kind of messy. And what I recognize as a grandparent, thinking back to when your triplets were in first, when I first started at Veritas Academy and had no grandchildren, and now have 11 grandchildren with one in high school, I realize again and again how short the season of raising kids is. It's messy, but there's so many specks of gold, and we really got to focus there. So I'm going to give you 5 tips, and Christi, you can add your thoughts as I share these, but the first one is not to regret past mistakes. I think back to my first year of teaching my grandkids 7 years ago, and I go, oh my, it really wasn't very pretty. And there's so much that I have learned. But rather than focusing in on what I could have done differently, I'm choosing to embrace what I can do better today. Each day is the only thing I can really handle. How about you, Christi?
Yeah, that I am prone to I'm prone to relive the past, and what by for whatever reason I recently did some Enneagram reading, and apparently my Enneagram number is very prone to sort of dwell in the past, and for whatever reason I am. And so that's a discipline where I just simply kind of rethink Bible verses a lot of times, like the one I quoted a little while ago, which is, that God can redeem years that the locusts have eaten. I look at uh, Bible verses, Bible principles about how God over and over again took imperfect people who had made many mistakes and who had done many things wrong, and yet used them mightily. And I constantly am giving God, I constantly in my prayer life will say, here, Lord, here's my day, here's my past and all it contains.
Yes.
The good and the bad, the opportunities, the missed opportunities, all of this. And I want you to take all of that and separate it out and just use whatever you want to, for your kingdom and for your work going forward. And that act, I think, accomplishes something in this spiritual realm with him, where he really honors that and says, yes, I will do that. But it also accomplishes something with me spiritually, where I now know I can't do anything about my past or any regrets I may have, but he can, and I've released it. Does that make sense?
It really does. And what that allows you to do then is really the next tip is to be content in today. I think easy to long, as we look back, we long for times when they were easier, or we look forward to where we think life will be easier. I had this weird view of retirement, thinking that someday I would be free of raising kids and I'd just sit on my porch and bake cookies and do all these things that I wanted to do. And yet now in retirement age, I actually have more on my plate than I've ever had, but I love it because there's purpose. I can't imagine a life without purpose. And we need to, in everything we're doing, understand that what can I do today to impart to my children and my grandchildren, in my case, an unshakable faith that they can become these steadfast kids who know God, who know who they are, excuse me, and walk confidently as his image bearers. What can I do today to be content in what God has given me today? And that means I can't worry about the future. Point 3, the what if that makes us anxious, right?
Yes. One of my favorite stories is the story, I don't know if people are even very familiar about this anymore, but Jim Elliot was a missionary in the 50s, I believe, and he ended up being killed in Ecuador. There was a movie made about it a while ago called The Tip of the Spear, but he wrote some books, and his wife wrote several books. I guess his wife wrote the books Through Gates of Splendor and many other things through the course of her long writing and speaking career after he died. But he had a quote that has always stayed with me, and we actually use that in our senior leadership class to tell our seniors and other people too. But he said this: wherever you are, be all there. Live to the hilt every situation you believe to be the will of God. And that quote I have thought of for years. It keeps me grounded because, again, I'm not very good naturally at being in the present. And so I say that to myself: wherever you are, be all there. Live to the hilt every situation you believe to be the will of God. This past weekend, I was on a college visit with one of my daughters in Alabama, and I had several things going on simultaneously, some back at home, some at school, but that quote kept running through my mind. I am in Alabama, and these things can kind of cook like they would on a stovetop on the back burner. Like it's okay for them to sort of simmer at the back of my mind, and for me to dip in and out of checking on them once in a while. But I was in Alabama on a college visit, and my daughter there needed my full attention. So I was reminding myself to be all there. So that's a good example of it.
That is a great example. And, you know, I think it's easy for us, rather than to be present, our minds go to what we can worry about in the future. Particularly, I find with moms, they worry about their oldest child because they have nothing to go on. It's always their first experience. And I think you can relate to that, having a child who's already in college. But I find that the things that we worry about, the things that moms and dads worry about, in a few weeks, they change. Life is changing. And I think what we need to remember always, even when we're working with our kids at home, is to not grow anxious over outcomes. And by that, I would say, you know, grades and test scores and GPA and colleges that they're going to get into, or what sport team they make and whatnot. And while we want our kids to be successful, we need to focus on the skills that get them there. That their character and their attitude and their resiliency and their work ethic and their attentiveness, their willingness to learn. These are the things that help them get to the places that they want to be. I think it's so interesting. One of the things I have to constantly remind my grandchildren of is how to define mistakes. That the mistakes are not a defining moment for them, but a learning opportunity, and that those downtimes and when things go bad are times when you can really learn. And that's, I think, being fully invested in today, that we're looking at what's happening and not making it become anxious about tomorrow, right?
I am just drinking in everything you're saying. If there's not even another soul on the planet that hears what you're saying today, except for me, then it's well worth it. And I wish that I wish I could sit until it's hard for me to admit that I am still at this age, and after all that I feel like I've been through and tried to appropriate in my own growth and journey, it's hard for me to admit that I am still an anxious, fretting person far more often than I would like to be. I have to discipline myself to get out of that. And so I am just soaking in your words, to be anxious for nothing. Really God's words, be anxious for nothing, in everything by prayer and supplication, make your requests known by God. And just these reminders, I cannot give what I do not have. I cannot pass on to my children or my students or my colleagues or my friends what I do not have. And so if I'm not steadfast and letting myself rest and be non-anxious, then I can't pass this on to anyone else. So I'm just drinking it in.
Well, and on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "Do not be anxious about tomorrow, for sufficient in one day is a trouble of its own." And I remember those years of raising my kids and thinking someday when they would be raised, I would no longer worry about them. That's a lie.
Right.
Go on, you worry about them, then they become parents and you worry about their grandkids. And I finally had to realize I have way too many people to worry about, and I need to get past this. So I want to just say along that note that there's this tendency, if you're like me, to think when this happens, then I won't worry, or I'll be content, or I'll be okay. When my babies are out of diapers, I'll have more time. Or when my kids go to school, I'll have time for myself. Or when my kids get out of school, I won't worry so much. And when they're through college, then I'll be content. And when they get married, it goes on and on and on. And the one thing that I feel that I have finally learned, and I wish I had learned this earlier, there's my regret coming in, is this when will never happen. We must take today as the only time we truly, truly have. So I just want to end on a fifth point of, do you feel too busy? I think that is kind of a norm in our culture, that we're just busy people. I just want to encourage you to build in margin. When you're thinking you don't have enough time to handle your responsibilities, you're kind of saying that God hasn't given you adequate time for what he has put on your plate. And he always gives us enough time to do the things he has for us, no more and no less. And so that's where we have to go back, and we're going to be talking a lot about this in future sessions of really defining our priorities. And I think about the fact, I've in my life, I have to admit there's times that I felt too busy to even pray. And yet, Oswald Chambers, I was reading from one of his quote books, Christi, this week, and he said that none of us have time to pray. We have to take time from other things. We have to grab time from lesser pursuits to do the thing that is our most important work, is to pray for our families, for each other, and to put ourselves at the feet of Jesus, who is the source of our strength and wisdom and vitality. Because honestly, this is so convicting for me. A pastor once told me that we pray as much as we want to. And so I just want to encourage you. Isn't it funny how God's calendar doesn't quite match ours, that on that very, very day that you absolutely have no margin, that unexpected happens, it all falls in the same day? And I think it's because we have this idea that we pack our days so full, and God is just teaching me on those days that this constant vigilant to keep my life on track is not how he wants me to live, that we're created to both work and to rest, and we must have margin in our lives. So I asked myself, and encourage everyone to ask yourselves, what useless pursuits can you set aside so you have time for what's most important? And one other comment is what I had to learn to do. I read this article once that really changed me, is that not just my to-do list. I'm so good at building a to-do list and marking it off and feeling like I've accomplished a lot, but I now include a not to-do list. When my grandchildren are in my home, I X out that portion of my calendar and have no other tasks there. I am fully there to be invested in that time with them, because I know how quickly it's going to pass. And I also know that if I am not modeling a reliance on Jesus, if I'm not modeling the gospel to my children and grandchildren, why would I expect them to embrace it for themselves? It needs to be active and working in my life. So with that closing thought, just want to close on the verse Psalm 90:12, which says, teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. I love that God takes our time-bound efforts and brings about eternal significance out of them. And that's what Christi was talking about when we first opened. So Christi, what are your closing thoughts?
I was going to read, do you mind if I read the entire Psalm 90? It's not too terribly long.
I love that psalm. Yes.
But I think we were talking just a couple of days ago about perhaps reading this psalm every day at the beginning of our days for a little while. Mm-hmm. And I think I might start doing this, just letting it become sort of a repetitious practice that I do until these words sink in. Psalms were made to be this, to be repeated, and so that they sink in layer by layer by layer deeper into your soul with every repeating of them. And so I'll just read it very quickly. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You return man to dust and say, return, O children of man, for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. For we are brought to an end by your anger, and by your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80. If their span is but toil and trouble, they are soon gone and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? And here's the part that we talked about. So teach us to number our days so that we may get a heart of wisdom. And then he just finishes up. Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us. Establish the work of our hands. Yes, establish the work of our hands. So thanks for being patient while I read it all. But the key phrases that I love, that I just want to keep remembering are: teach me, Lord, today to number my days, that I may gain a heart of wisdom. And then every day I would just like to be praying that your favor, Lord, would be on me and establish the work of my hands. It's just such a good and quick renewal of perspective.
It is. And thank you for reading that. It's really life-giving. And thank you for joining us today. Next week, we will be having a guest speaker, one of the moms at Veritas Academy who has a career and also teaches her kids at home in partnership with our school. We find that we have many moms who do this. They juggle both work and they juggle teaching their kids. And so she has a wealth of tips and experience in this. So next week, we'll be talking about that, how to juggle work and teaching and raising our kids at the same time. So join us again next week. Have a great rest of the week. Goodbye.
Bye.